continue now with Luke 12, verses 35 through 40. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming, and begins to beat the servants, eat and drink and get drunk. In other words, that idea of my master's taking a long time in coming could be translated as, well, this is my life to live and I'll do with it what I want, which of course is how most everyone thinks and defaults to. And in ignorance or in willfulness or in foolishness chooses to live that way. It's my life, I'll do what I want. And more often than not, that is self-indulgence, satisfying the various passions, dominating others, having requirements of others, all of these things that are the reality of the human condition. Living like that, without God, who's taking too long in coming, is the metaphor. This sense, this mistaken sense that God is not present, leads to what the Christ tells us next. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, at an hour he's not aware of. And then these very strong words. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. Rarely do we hear such graphic, negative terms. What we are being given here is the result of a life that is lived without God. Whatever the excuse is, he's taking too long in coming, I've given up on him, I never knew him. We live our life as though there is no God. And the end result is this nothingness, this non-being, or even worse, in these images of being cut to pieces, because all is lost. The very purpose of our being here has led to nothing. So these intense images are meant to wake us up to the urgency and importance of being present to the reality of God, of not taking life for granted, certainly not making it our own, but knowing that our purpose is to serve God, to open that door when Spirit knocks, and ultimately to participate in that communion with the divine. That is the ultimate bliss of existence, both here and eternally. Finally, we are told that servant who knows his master's will and does not do it will be beaten with many blows. So that idea that we know what we should be doing, we know that there is a God, we know that spiritual teachings, wisdom teachings, religions have tried to reach us, and yet we've turned away. This is risky business, because the opportunity was handed to find the way, to live in order to commune with God. But to willfully reject those opportunities is a devastating spiritual condition. It is true that for some there is not this opportunity, which is why Christ is specifically addressing those who could have but didn't. And in our Western culture, however secular and dark it has become, those signs are still there to be found. With a little extra effort, with a little persistence, with a little inner hunger, we can get past the obstacles, the wrong associations, and find our way to these mystic truths. He tells us the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. So there is a justice here, a recognition, which in turn must be our realization of how important it is to take advantage of what we are given. And then he tells us those famous words, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much will." And then he tells us those famous words, "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." But these are beautiful things, because having been given the grace to discover the path to the heart of God, what is asked of us is to become a blessing, is to become a channel of unconditional love, is to bring healing to the world. So it is not some heavy demand, it is the expectation that finding and being healed and renewed by what we find, we then are called to do a particular kind of work in the world. Having been forgiven, we forgive. Having discovered divine love, we in turn love. So this is a beautiful thing. It is a reminder to that human part of us that always takes for granted, that always fails to discern right action, that when we are given from the hand of Spirit, if you will, that is only the beginning. There is more to come. We have a role to play. This is why the idea that developing the inner self is a selfish thing, which social activists often point to and reject, is so false, because that inner development, that inner awakening, that inner work ultimately leads to real giving out into the world with a power and purity that can only come from inner transformation. And all the great mystics of centuries past show us that very thing. Finding that illumination enables us to truly serve in this world.